working on rigs, it's really easy to get discouraged. Whether it be, the temperature, currently negative 15 inside the barn here, or, you end up biting off a little bit more you can chew, or maybe, just maybe, it's the people that get under your skin. In this case, the haters for your project. Well, let's talk about that, and let's talk about how you can persevere and how you can keep on moving forward when everyone's telling you to stop. Welcome to Iowa State. So, first things first, let's talk about me for a second. Colt Selleck, Iowa Stable Garage. I got a lot of projects here in the barn. We're going to quickly go over the projects here, maybe some outside, and then we're going to talk about some things. Got ourselves an old square body Chevrolet. Hasn't moved in a long time. Don't get confused by the Sierra Classic badges, all that. It's a little bit all over the place, that truck. We got our 54 International project, 51 front clip, 2003 F-150 front end, rear back half, a whole bunch of stuff. It's a project. Got our 1996 Ford F-150 with a big block Ford 4-speed transmission, long bed to short bed conversion, a whole bunch of stuff. It's a project. 1985 RX-7 with a 302 HO and a T5 world-class transmission, 410 gear ratio. It's a project. 1985 F-250 diesel, 4-speed manual, 4-wheel drive. It's a project. And we have many more projects like the Mazda, grandfather's truck, Trans Am, all that stuff. But we're just talking about the ones here, or else the list would be way too long. But if you notice, each one of these I said is a project. Even though some are way more done and finished than others, there's still always room for improvement, and there's still always room to keep the ball rolling on those vehicles. A project's never really done. You'll understand this if you dived into a car, you've blown it all apart, put it all back together, even when every single bolt is changed, you'd still have your mind rolling. And there might be changes coming down the road for certain things. So everything is always a project. That's just how it is. So, case in point, we have our 1996 Ford F-150. A lot of people give me flack, say I'm stupid, that I don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about this truck. It got popular on our Flexi Frame videos. It's a short video if you guys haven't seen it. It's on the channel somewhere. Either way, what I want to talk about is some people in that, I said this is a restoration, basically. A lot of people didn't like my way of using restoration as a term for this truck. Well, I can explain to you why I used it. Now, I'll give it to you. Face value, this truck doesn't look like a restoration. A lot of people said, oh, that's a gigantic piece of crap. Oh, yeah, that's not a restoration. That's an absolute garbage pile. Oh, look how rusted it is. Yada, yada, yada. But they don't know the journey that this truck went on. Let's go over this project a little bit, and then we can start talking about it and really dive in. So this fella right here is a 1996 Ford F-150. Now, you guys are going to say, whoa, that's not a 96 Ford F-150. You have no idea what you're talking about. Get off the internet. Oh, you don't know what's going on. Slow down. Don't take it at face value. Look at the truck for a good long second. You'll find the 96 F-150 in it. Do you see it? Do you see it? If you know these trucks, that mirror never came on an 80s pickup. Same as that visor. Maybe even those wing windows. That's weird. Looking closer and closer. That door sill is 96. That door itself is a 96. Oh, but the interior is an 80s. You don't know what you're talking about. Listen, fellas. Plastic, 90s. Dash is 80s. But, we retrofitted this guy into here. 90s sliding window. 90s headliner. Just because something might look something doesn't mean it is. Just kind of how it is. Sometimes if it squawks like a duck, looks like a duck, it still might not be a duck. I guess is what I'm getting at. But this guy right here is actually a 1996 Ford F-150. It's a long bed, single cab, 4-wheel drive automatic pickup that we heavily modified. We welded 80s front frame horns onto this so we can run an 80s bumper. 80s front clip all together. Got an 85 big block forward and a manual 4-speed in it. 80s interior. Took the long bed, cut it, made it a short bed. First time doing body work, first time doing paint. Actually, this isn't even normal car paint. That's a nice little experiment we did on the channel with Rust-Oleum. Turned out all right. A little bit of orange peel, but turned out all right. It did the job. It made it one color. This fella in here has actually a sandblasted, needle-scaled Southern frame because, you know, the 1996 Ford F-150 original frame was completely rotten. So this is an old long bed frame, but it's completely Southern diffs, everything. Sandblasted, needle-scaled, primed, epoxy primed, and then painted over. Trust. The rear diff I never painted or primed. Same as the leaf springs. Just because, you know, I don't want to do something just to cut it up and change things down the road. I'm just wasting my time. But it has new brakes all around, new U-joints, all of that stuff. So I guess to keep going with the actual theme of this video, a lot of people didn't like my use of the term restoration on this truck. They really didn't like it. But at what point does it become a restoration, and at what point does it not become a restoration? Does it need flawless paintwork to become a restoration if everything else underneath is brand new? So if you have a cracked dash and the rest of the vehicle's nice, is it still a restoration? Does it have to use every single factory bolt to be a restoration? Because we start opening up a can of worms on what exactly qualifies as a complete restoration of a vehicle. Is it just basically making it what you want? Making it all new? This truck right here has more new parts than a 2018 vehicle, minus engine and transmission, but new brakes, new suspension, new ball joints, like everything's brand new on it. So at what point is it still an old, tired old truck if it has a completely brand new frame, new brakes, new wiring, everything? It begs the question, what point does this become a restoration and what point does it not become a restoration? So for me, this guy, he needs basically paint, and I would qualify that as done. We still have the tailgate to do, but that's just the tailgate. Then this guy is pretty much all squared away for what it is. From the non-running and driving vehicle to a completely running and driving vehicle, I'd say that's a pretty good restoration at the end of the day. Just before we leave this guy, another big complaint that we usually have is, oh, that vehicle doesn't run, that vehicle doesn't run, that vehicle doesn't run, that vehicle doesn't run. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. None of your vehicles run. That looks like it's been sitting here for 20 plus years, yada, yada, yada. It's an old barn, fellas. I don't have to tell you guys, the guys that watch my long format videos, you guys know. But for anyone new, it's an old barn. This car came in here completely clean. Completely clean. We're doing a little bit of modification work to it, but completely clean across the board. As you can see, just from sitting here, it's collected barn dust. Same as this truck. I had this guy completely detailed before I brought it in. Same idea. It collects dust. That's just how it is. It's an old barn. So to answer the first question, how do you deal with haters? When they're saying you don't know what you're talking about because that doesn't look like a 96 Ford F-150 and oh, that's not all brand new parts and oh, you don't know what you're talking about. They don't have all the information, but they're never going to look for all the information. It's really hard to convince someone that thinks that they're right, that they're wrong. Sometimes this is how it is, and online, you just got to pick and choose your battles. Forget about them. Don't listen to them, because at the end of the day, I'm driving around this pretty brand new 1996 Ford F-150 pickup. I quite like the old pickup, and at the end of the day, I made that with my mind. I get to enjoy the fruits of my labor, and one person, two people saying some negative stuff about it ain't gonna bring me down. But we're addressing it in this video because hopefully you guys can have the same mindset, especially if you're going into the same project. Here's another one, RX-7. Oh, why did you put a V8 in it? Oh, it has to be a rotary power. If it's not a rotary, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't own this car because it's not a rotary. How dare you put a Ford 302 in it? It should have been a 350 Chevy or an LS, yada, yada, yada. Kind of the same line as the old F-150 here. At the end of the day, the haters, the negative comments on people and stuff like that, they're not going to be the one enjoying this car. the apex seals were so far gone on this rotary here, and it was a 12A. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's a 12A, and they're non-machinable housings, basically. You can machine a 13B down to a 12A spec, or up to a 12A spec if you look at like how machining works. But either way, the engine needed a whole new engine to put in when 302s are darn cheap. T5s are pretty darn cheap. Get double the horsepower, almost double the torque, that kind of stuff. So it's just, why screw around with something that will make the car undrivable when you can put something in a half a year, whatever, and really have a nice, fun car? I think it's a no-brainer at the end of the day. Again, we're going to be the ones enjoying it, not so much the haters. But there's a lot of people that love this car still, and this car has broken a couple feelings on the street. Let's just say that. It's a fun rig to drive. Here's a nice one. You've ruined this truck. How dare you chop up a perfectly good 54 International? Do you know how rare that truck is? You should have completely restored that to spec. It deserves to be restored, yada, yada, yada. How dare you? You should be ashamed. You know, all that stuff. I've even had comments from people saying, how dare you cut up that pristine bed? Or, how dare you cut up that pristine front end and make it a hinge and everything? Some people could have used those parts. Had the same type of comments on this fender right here. This one's a big controversy. How dare you not use an English wheel on this guy, or a shrinker stretcher? And this is how I would have done it, and we could have had that fender done in 15 minutes or less. All that stuff. Or, how dare you cut up a perfectly good spare tire mount? Someone could have used that fender. You should have just bought a whole new fender. Well, that's a lot to chew, but let's start with the front end. So, if any of you guys have watched the first episode of the International Build, I would highly recommend watching it, because it's a stark contrast of where we are now with the body compared to where we started with. But to summarize, all what we really had was this hood and this grill section down to here, crossed and back up. Only this. Everything else was a rotten piece, super bondo piece, that kind of stuff. And we literally had to rebuild it off of pictures online. I think we did pretty good. We had to widen it and stuff at the end of the day, modify it slightly. But what you see here came entirely out of my head and, cross-referenced off pictures. So, for people to say, oh, how dare I cut up a perfectly good front end, that happened on the widening videos and stuff like that, I take it as a compliment. Because obviously we made it close enough to the original spec that some people, from the video doesn't do it really justice to what it looks like in person. It's a little bit more ragged than you guys might think. But we did a good enough job that they think it's factory original and they think it was rust-free. Well, you just gotta take it as a compliment at the end of the day. Now, as for the fender here, when talking about the fender, again, when they made the complaints of, oh, you should have sold that fender to someone that, wanted it, that kind of stuff, or you should have used your shrinker stretcher, your English wheel, you shouldn't have done it that way, yada, yada, yada. Let's address the first one. Everyone that said, I should have sold this to someone else and bought another fender. Well, as you can see, most of this truck is handmade for cost. Cost for an old International is pretty high. That fender right there was pretty rotten, as you guys can see. Had to replace the entire ellipse on that side. Had to replace the bottom sill, patch panels, everything. It also, didn't have the inverse section on that. That was another complaint. Why didn't you just flip the inverse section over, welded it in? Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. It didn't have it. It was completely rotten away. No one is going to buy a completely rotten spare tire fender for an old International pickup, because in my area, there's not a lot of International pickups at all. And no one's going to buy a Canadian shipped rusty fender like that. If they're going to go through the time, they're going to buy a Southern fender. They don't make repops for now. Let's address the English wheel comment, or the shrinker stretcher, or the machine hammer. That kind of stuff. I might have got the wrong term for that. Where is the English wheel, or the shrinker stretcher, or the power hammer? I don't see it. Maybe I misplaced it. No, it's not under there. Is it in the cab? Maybe it's over in that pile. No, that can't be it. You see what I'm getting at? We don't have a shrinker stretcher. We don't have a power hammer. We don't have an English wheel. All those are really nice tools and really nice products, and we would have used those if we had them. But here's the thing, fellas. And again, I don't have to tell the guys that are watching, the long format videos, because you guys have seen this likely from the very get-go. And you guys understand, I went over it in the original video. But for everyone that's new, this right here is done in strips. It's like a Terry's chocolate orange. The best course of action that I had at the end of the day was to use my abilities with the welder and the cutter, because that was the most I was familiar with. You build your radius, you build your arc with that, cut and butt, away you go. Takes a lot more time, but you can do any radius in that. Same as exhaust pipe, intake pipes, all that stuff. Another comment I had was, why didn't you just take a big panel like that and a sandbag, or, all these tools that I don't have, but let's say I had a sandbag, and beat the panel to death, make the rounded curve and go with it like that. Now, I might have had that. I might have been able to do that, but I tried with a pine block, wouldn't work. I actually tried for an hour and a half trying to get a radius out of a single panel, an 18 gauge panel, straight panel to a curved panel. Couldn't do it. It was beyond my skill set. This was in my skill set. So the alternative to not doing this is not doing it at all. And I think at the end of the day, we managed to get it. The last comment on that fender is, you should have just bought new. It would have been a lot better, cheaper in the long run. Would have looked a lot better. Now you're going to have to grind that, bondo that, all that stuff. Let me answer your two questions, because I guess it's technically two questions. Buying new for an international pickup ain't cheap. There's not a lot in my area. They're all going to have to be bought, either across the border into the States or shipped out west. That's Canadian freight, likely going to need a crate. It's not going to be good. You're going to be spending a lot of money just on an old fender like that, and it's going to be an old fender. They don't make repop of that. Second complaint was, that's going to be a terrible, terrible time. You're going to spend so much time grinding, body work, all that stuff. It's not worth it. You shouldn't do it. Well, what if I told you, all that isn't being ground down? All that isn't being ground down. All that isn't being ground down. All of this isn't being ground down. None of that's being ground down. Every single line that you see on there is a weld seam, a cut and butt weld seam. Every single line that you see on here is a cut and butt weld seam. This is a rat rod type build. We're dolling it up a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's a rat rod. It came from my mind. It's not factory original. So we're keeping all the weld seams. So why would I grind that all down when it fits the rest of the truck? Again, a lot of the haters online, a lot of the people that have negative comments, they say what they see, and that's it. They don't have their research. They're not as informed, none of that. And some of them might not even make the comments they do if they knew the story on the truck. Others are just mean-spirited at the end of the day, but you don't listen to those ones anyway. But they just don't know that the theme of this truck is like exposed welds and kind of like a rat rod type look. So saying that this hull has to be ground down and I'm stupid to, do something like that, it's not. It fits the build perfectly with this kind of build. So there's no real issue there, in my opinion. Some other people might say otherwise, but it's okay. Again, this truck falls into the same category as that guy, as the RX-7 over there. We're going to be the ones to drive it. We're going to be the ones to enjoy it. It's going to be great. Here's another thing on, driving the old 54 International chassis swap. The amount of absolute how dare yous I've had on using a 5.42 valve, a 4R70W transmission. I'm not sure what transfer case that is. Sorry. But that combo in this truck, a lot of people don't like it. It comes down to the same thing as if you were going to build rat rods and trucks in your shop and you had leftover parts from certain things. Not everything you build can be a $10,000, a $15,000 build. You go bankrupt, fellas. You won't have enough money in the world with your job to sustain something like that. So some projects, you have to pick and choose your parts. 5.42 valve came from this front end of the chassis, at least the front end part. The 4R70W, the transfer case, came from this chassis.
Now, I'm not saying the 5.4 is going to stay in there forever. It's not the engine of choice I even had. But, that guy came with the truck. It was free. It was sitting here. That right there, engine, transmission, transfer case, to buy what I want, it's likely going to cost, $700, $800 to buy that whole system. And then we're going to have to retrofit it in.
Versus we got one free sitting right there. We can enjoy the truck a lot sooner. We can use that money for glass. And glass ain't going to be cheap. So we can use our money on stuff that we need to use it on. And we can save a buck or two and use it on things that we don't. The 5.4 is going to have plenty of power for what this is. It's a tried and tested drivetrain, especially for the native drivetrain it came in. The four-wheel drive system, all that's still 2003 F-150.
The 5.4 is going to be fine in here for the first year or two. It's not going to be an issue. We can enjoy the truck with the 5.4, all that setup, as we build another setup. But for right now, cost, we can put that in there.
I would rather have this whole truck done sheet metal-wise, glass, all that stuff. I would rather put a little four-cylinder in it and be able to drive it sooner than to wait for the exact engine I want and keep it shelved, basically, all said and done, for 3 or 4 extra years. Why would I do that when I got a perfectly good power plant that bolts in? You got to think about it that way, fellas.
So that's the snow for you guys there, for example. Now we get to talk about Old Blue here. There we go. So Old Blue is a 6.9 IDI. Has a pretty brand new repop injection pump in it. 2 red top Optima batteries. I believe they're 800 CCA a piece. Has an electric lift pump coming off of it. Brand new return lines. Brand new glow plugs. Retrofitted glow plug controller that's not using the mechanical on the 6.9. It's a brand new solid state controller. Pretty much foolproof. Brand new lines. Everything. All the way back. Brand new tank even.
So you have to ask yourself, what happens when you have an airtight brand new fuel system, tons of cold cranking amps, brand new glow plug system, brand new glow plugs, and a brand new remanufactured injection pump? Is that a recipe for, I almost completely forgot, brand new high torque gear reduction mini starter? It's a DB electrical. So what happens when you have all of that and an old pickup? It should start pretty good at almost any temperature.
You wouldn't believe the amount of fellas that call me out for BS that, this truck right here doesn't start like it does. I'm either putting ether in it or it's warmed up, all that stuff. And the amount of people that say, it's already been warm, meanwhile there's complete ice on the windshield, ice under the bonnet, ice on the engine, but they think it's warmed up, I don't know. Another big complaint is, there's tire tracks, brand new tire tracks coming in. This truck hasn't moved in 3 days. That's not a brand new tire track. And yes, there's still snow on the tire. This is the climate we live in.
I think the reason why there's a lot of haters on this blue Ford is everyone has an opinion on these old trucks. Some people have opinions on them from, 20, 30 years ago when they were brand new, when they were the brand new hot ticket truck, and then they moved on to the next brand new hot ticket truck, and then they might have been 5 or 6 different other hot ticket best of the best trucks in the world by now. They buy new all the time. They seem to think that they're experts on these old rigs, but at the end of the day, you can't compare a truck with brand new everything that starts really well to a truck that, might have a whole bunch of return line fuel leaks, might have 2 junk batteries, lawnmower batteries in it, an old tired out injection pump that hates starting, and you're going to need ether every time. This truck isn't that truck. If you want a good starting old diesel truck, you have to go through the entire thing and get it operating to the parameters you want it. You can't expect something super tired to perform. That's just how it is. At the end of the day, you just have to take everything that everyone says with a grain of salt, because you know your life better than anyone. You know personally if you're lying or not. In this case, I'm not. Starts fine. These trucks are all projects. That's not a lie. That's just how things are. But from the outside person looking in, when they just get a little tiny snippet and they don't do any more research or they don't watch the rest of your videos, whatever, they're very quick to make an opinion off a single word that you say in a complete book, let's say. That would be the best way to look at it. The whole thing's a book, but they're going to focus on one little word. So this is kind of how it is. Take everything they say with a grain of salt. Keep working. The best way to show up a hater is to get your projects done and enjoy them. Because a lot of people, they can't see the grandiose vision. Even something like that, that's a lot of stock parts, some modified, but a lot of stock. They wouldn't be able to take the 2 trucks, blow them all apart, and put them all back together. They just couldn't do it. Especially this guy, everything modified, they just couldn't do it. The best way to show them up is to drive the thing. Have fun with it. Enjoy your project. There'll be a lot less naysayers once it's all running. Once that 5.4 is humming inside that, a lot of people are going to like the project a lot more. But at the end of the day, there's going to be always negative comments. This summer, hopefully, we'll be driving a lot more of them. But at the end of the day, you can't rush certain things. I'll catch you guys in the next one really, really soon. Hey, see ya.